And welcome back. As we go ahead and continue looking at our classes today, let's go ahead and look at methods that actually return a Boolean type value. So we've of course looked at return types for things like strings and ints and void, but what about a Boolean? Well, there's nothing special about methods that return a value of type Boolean. The type is a primitive type just like we would treat ints and doubles. A method that returns a value of type Boolean must have a return statement of the form return and then some Boolean expression. Therefore, the invocation of the method is typically going to return either going to be a true value or a false value. It therefore makes the most sense to use the invocation of the method to control things like an if-else statement or a while loop or any place that we would normally have a Boolean expression be allowed. So let's look at this with an example. So let's say we want to add something to our date third try class, and we want to say, hey, we want to test the date to see if it's between, let's say, 2 years. So if we look here, we have a public Boolean is between. It's between a int lower and higher, and it's simply just going to compare the instance variable here for these two values. And if we wanted to see this in our main program, you can just say, like, if date is between 2000, 4000, you look at the set date here, it says 3001, which means that if we were to evaluate this, it would come back as true, which means it would be between the years 2000 and 4000. If we had this as, say, 5001, then it would fall into the else statement and would say the date is not between those years. So with our Boolean expressions, if we look particularly at how we're using these in our code, so for example, date is between 2000, 4000, this is an invocation of that Boolean expression. So we have a method that is going to return a Boolean value that is returning either true or false based upon the values that we're passing into it. Therefore, it makes sense to use it as the controlling Boolean expression in that if-else statements. The expression year in the definition of is between really means, of course, this dot year. And this, if you remember, stands for the calling object. So in date is between 2000 and 4000, the calling object in this case is date. So our expression from before will return the value date.year is greater than low year and date.year is less than high year. But if you think about this though, 2000 and 4000 are plugged in for the parameters low year and high year respectively. So this expression really is equivalent to us saying date.year is greater than 2000 and date.year is less than 4000. Thus, our if statement is equivalent to saying if date.year is greater than 2000 and date.year is less than 2000, we print out it's between those years, otherwise we say it's not. Therefore, our output produced is, of course, as we already talked about, the date is between the years 2000 and 4000. Now let's give you another Boolean example just to kind of make sure we have a good grasp on how this is working. Another example is to test if a date precedes another date. So for example, we say public Boolean precedes date for try other date. We can then return a statement. You notice this is a very long statement, all right, because we're testing year, we're testing the month, and we're of course also testing the day. So you can see there's a lot here that we have to do some comparison for. Now this method, of course, is included with our date fourth try class, which we'll take a look at here in just a second. One thing I want to have you focus on, though, is with our Booleans is the return statement. The return statement in the definition of the method precedes might look intimidating. We saw that's a huge amount of code. But if you think about it, it's really straightforward. It says that date 1 dot precedes date 2 will return true provided one of the following three conditions are satisfied. So we have to say if the year is less than the other year. We have to see if date 1 is equal to date 2 and date 1 to month comes before. Date 2 dot month, date 1 and date 2 have the same year and month, and date 1 dot day is less than date 2 dot day. With a little bit of thought about this, we can realize that obviously, well, date 1 has to precede date 2 in time precisely when you think about these three conditions that have to be satisfied. All right, and if we go ahead and look at our code, here's our main class, which of course you can see we have created a date for try object. We're using our set date command to go ahead and set a date, and of course we are evaluating our simple is between here with 2000 and 4000, which if we remember will evaluate to true, which means we will have this first print line statement. Then I created another date object here, and we set this one to 3/4/3001. So same year, but you notice it has different months. Then, of course, we have a proceed statement. So if we wanted to see if that date precedes it, we're going to say it came before it. If they are equal, we're going to go ahead and print off they're equal. Otherwise, we're going to say it comes after. So let's just go ahead and give this a run here. And we say the date is between the years 2000 and 4000. And the date comes before the second date entry. And that's all that we really need to think about. If we look at the actual code, though, our 3 Boolean statements are right here. And so we have, for example, equals. We have month that equals other month. And day equals other date dot day. And year equals other date dot year. So again, remember this one is testing with an AND statement, which means all these statements are going to have to be true. Whereas if we look at proceeds, you'll notice we have a lot of OR statements in here, which means only one of those conditions have to be true. If we look at the is between, we again are having a AND expression to evaluate if year is greater than low year and if it is less than high year. Again, if you have a good foundational understanding of how Boolean expressions work, this shouldn't be too difficult to go ahead and write code. The biggest thing that to keep in mind is if we are testing, for example, something like equals, we're going to want to test each of our instance variables. And that's a big thing to keep in mind here. Like if you look at is between, well, is between, we are only testing on year. If we say something like equals, and notice what type of parameter we're passing in. We're passing in a date fourth try. And because we're doing a date fourth try, similar thing with here with proceeds, we're doing a date fourth try. A lot of times when we do that, we're going to have to test each one of these individualized instance variables. So if I had a fourth instance variable up here, let's say a one to handle the time or maybe time zone, then I would of course have to have that in the equals here, for example. Let's just say time zone is another one. Let's say it's a string that we have to pass in. Then I would have to add another AND statement here, and then compare time zone if it dot equal the other date dot time zone. So again, little things to keep in mind here as we start working with things like equal statement.